Hello and welcome to Women Soaring's monthly webinar. Today you have myself, Taylor, and Clarissa.
Hello.
We are going to be talking about loneliness and all the different ways that we may experience loneliness because it doesn't always look how we think loneliness is going to look. I recently wrote a blog. I don't even actually think it's out yet, but a blog about how we assume that loneliness could be that you might not have many friends around or a community, or maybe your family is not close, but we don't necessarily always think about when you are completely surrounded with support and you feel lonely in a situation or a circumstance, something that you might not feel that other people would understand. And there's just so many different aspects of this that I don't want us to glaze over it as like it's only community or it's only this situation or circumstance. What other kind of ways, Clarissa, can you think of any other, like, you know what I mean? Just
No, I think you got it. Yeah. So
yeah.
what are some examples for yourself where you felt like that?
I would definitely say I'm going to totally ruin my whole blog, so y'all are going to have to just read it at some point. But one situation that I talk about in my blog is just when I was having that extremely tough patch with my marriage with my husband and I remember thinking like, no one is going to understand because no one's going to understand why I'm making the decisions I'm making of staying. No one's going to understand what it's like doing it during a pregnancy, or no one's going to understand what it's like. You know what I mean? It was just so many different like circumstances in that one event that I just felt that there was no one that was going to understand. So I couldn't share. And it's not true. It's just that's what we tell ourselves, like we tell ourselves that no one's ever been through this or no one's ever experienced it to these levels. And it wasn't until after the fact did I meet people that did go through similar situations and did choose the way we chose to go through and to stay together and do those things. But you don't really realize that until you start to open up and other people open up
Yeah.
to and I think
Yeah. What I find interesting too is that like in those times when you're feeling like no one's going to understand this and we isolate ourselves, like you're saying, we can be surrounded by community. We can be surrounded in a house full of people. We can have great relationships all around us. But when we get into that mindset, oh, no one will understand, or you assume people might judge you for the way that you're reacting to it, how you yourself isolate yourself,
you do.
even in the face of it. And isn't that what the enemy loves to do? He loves isolation. And I think it's even harder when you feel isolated when you are surrounded by people. Like it's even more lonely of a feeling. But what I think is so encouraging is that it's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, after you started to open up to people, you started realizing, oh, people do understand.
People have gone through this, people have made it through, and you can do that, and that you're not alone in this situation. And I think it's also a way for the enemy to keep us from reaching out for that support. And a lot of times I reach out, as you know, I reach out for prayer all the time. And I feel like that was a detriment to me because I wasn't reaching out for this covering and prayer over my marriage, over myself, over my husband, over my children. And I just think when I look back, how different or maybe faster could we have gone through that experience if I would have had prayer over my family? Because prayer is such a strong weapon that we sometimes just don't utilize, and it is always in our pocket. And so I just, if anyone's going through this, my big thing is reaching out, getting that prayer support, but also doing it to trustworthy people, because I know that there was one person I had reached out to, and I remember feeling betrayed because they went and told people. And that could be why I completely just like shut off. And I did not reach out to anyone through that entire time because of that first reach out that I did. So definitely making sure it's a trustworthy person, because there were definitely people on my side and on my camp ready to battle with me. I just wasn't opening that door.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And you have to make sure that you are doing that. So whether you are battling depression or anxiety or um, fear, or you are having marital issues or parenting, or I don't know. Come on, the world has so many things. Money, job. What is it? Feeling
Mm.
like the world is on you and you're by yourself is just not true.
But you're
Um,
not going to find that community either until you start reaching out,
Reaching out,
right?
which is uncomfortable. I get it. I'm like, I get that it's uncomfortable. I used to send out messages and I would panic because I was too scared to read any responses. So I would shut everything off so that I wouldn't realize if someone responded to me, because I would be too scared to see their reaction, even though they're positive. They weren't like a negative, but it was that I'm putting myself out there. I'm being vulnerable, right? And you don't want to feel
Mm.
rejected. Like, who likes that feeling? I don't. Okay, I'll be honest. I don't like to feel rejected.
Yeah.
So
But you might experience it.
you might.
You might experience the rejection. You might experience those people who go behind your back and share it when you didn't want them to, right?
Hmm.
But I think if we live in that fear of those few people, we could miss out on that great support system, on those great people who are prayer warriors, and miss out on the very people who, could be that light of God's truth.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, again, I'm totally ruining the whole blog. But anyways, like on the flip side of that, I do compare another situation of where I could have definitely isolated and felt lonely if I let the devil get in there again. Like if I let the enemy talk to me that way. But we had recently experienced a situation where we had a phone call and our daughter, we were told, was in an ambulance on her way to the hospital and they didn't know if she was alive, right? Like, so at that point, my first instinct could be either like fear to tell anyone that they might think we are awful parents, that we're neglectful, that we're this or we're that, or you know what I mean? That's what the enemy likes to tell you, like, oh, how could you let that happen to your child? Or how could this be
Mhm.
going on? And you could let that stuff fester and eat at you. And for us, we chose, I mean, it was within seconds. I mean, I was blasting out to everyone, like anyone and everyone I could think of, just prayer, 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 prayer. Because at that point, I was ripped from, there was nothing I could do. There was nothing my husband could do. We were literally across the country. Like, there was nothing we could do besides prayer. And let me tell you, that is a situation, if any, for God to tell you, like, hey, you have zero control. Like, I, like, I am in control. And as much as control you think you have, you don't, right? And I think that's a facade we live in too. Like, we think we have this control of keeping our kids safe, and we
Yeah.
control where they go. We control this, we control blah, 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 right? Like, we do monitor things, but at the end of the day, God's our protector and God's our
Well,
healer.
and he was using it too, right? Because not
Yeah.
only did you reach out for prayer, which got a ton of us on our knees before God, because it was life or death in that situation. Baby girl was on the line. But on the flip side, when I talked to your mom, she was saying how it witnessed to the people that were there, the first responders that were there, and it was a witness to them. So
Yeah.
prayer is huge when you just reach out for it, because you don't know how God is using it. And
Mhm.
sometimes in those times when we're super vulnerable, I know for me in the past, I wouldn't reach out for prayer because pride. Like,
Yeah.
I should be able to handle this. I should be able to, figure this out on my own. Oh, it can just be between me and God. But we're actually keeping the blessing from other people to be part of that story,
Yeah.
to also be affected by it and witness to other people through it. So we're actually like holding in the blessing versus letting it go, like your situation where God was able to like spread that blessing out by
Yeah.
not keeping it to yourself.
No. And even just seeing how God used that, like you said, he was witnessing through that. He was most definitely strengthening my husband and I in our own walk with him, and our own trust in everything with him. And at the same time, I don't know, I kind of lost train of thought. Hold on. It was off of the back end of what you just said. Hold on. And I'm like, what did you just end in saying? Because it was really important. But
I was saying that you would withhold the blessing from being spread out to
Yes.
people.
Yes. So being able to now hear more feedback. So recently we were told about people sending it out to their prayer warriors, and their prayer warriors sending it out to theirs. And we were just, it would be just random people we didn't even think about, or we didn't know we even got the message, or we didn't even know. And it was amazing to see how God's like network just lit a fire and it
Mhm.
spread. And we just truly had no idea the covering we had over us and the piercing peace that God gave us through that time. And it was miraculous, honestly, because she is safe and she is healthy. And but I do wonder if I would have had that big of a covering and blanketing over my marriage,
Yeah.
how would that have been moving forward? Like maybe where would I have not struggled as much, or my husband struggled as much, or all of those things. I just wonder, man, if I would have had that covering over us,
Mhm.
how like where
Well,
would
you
we
just brought it up, that peace, right? That
be?
supernatural sense of peace. There is, by the world's standards, there's no reason you should have felt peace in that moment. When you're far away, you don't know what's going on, and you are like basically told you don't know if she's alive or not. There's no reason you should have had peace. But when you spread that prayer out, not only does God bless you with supernatural peace, but you also have peace knowing that other people have your back in prayer. Other people are on it too. And, you know, our battle here on earth is not flesh and blood, right? The word says it's spiritual. So we are igniting the kingdom of God and all the heavenly armies when we, as a community, fire up in prayer
Yeah,
together like that. And so
definitely.
it's not even physically, you weren't even physically with all those people that you
No.
reached out to. And that's the beauty of it. You don't need to be lonely without being physically with people. You can reach out to those who aren't anywhere even near you
Yeah.
and have that kind of.
Everyone we reached out to is not even remotely near us. Let me tell you, we were definitely isolated as much as possible when we were told those news. That's for sure. Um, and I do think there is something with that though, because I think if I would have reached out in prayer in my marriage more, that I wouldn't have had those constant battles. I remember like almost every second having to be like, oh, okay, God, take that thought, take that thought, take that thought, take that thought. Oh
Mhm.
my dear, like I am just overwhelmed. Take the thought. It's not positive. It's not helpful. Take the thought, take the thought. And I was
Yeah.
in that battle alone because I wasn't having other people come alongside me in the battle and in the army. Like I was just this lone warrior. Like that is the weakest spot you can be, is to just be like open on the battlefield alone, and when you
Yeah.
really look at it like that, that's what I was doing. I was alone on the battlefield, and I did not bring the army that God tells us to like have, that community, and to reach out for those things. So those are kind of like my two comparisons of when I reached out for the power of prayer and when I chose to do it alone, and
Yeah.
maybe how much shorter that walk could have been. So I don't know, but I know you
Well, the story I was thinking about when I did not choose to really reach out.
have.
So this was Matthew's last deployment, and he was gone for like almost that whole year. And I was pregnant with our fourth kid, and that was the first time that Matthew had left for that amount of time when I didn't falter to like numbing myself. And it was really when my walk with the Lord was really first ignited. I mean, I was just like clamoring to figure this whole thing out. What does this walk with the Lord look like, right? Well, Matthew being gone for that long afforded the perfect opportunity because I was physically alone. A lot of her friends had moved that were living on base near us that I normally would have gone to. They had left, but I still had my church community. But because I was still like, in that mindset of pride and like, I can handle this, I could do this or whatever. It really was just me and the Lord. And although I think that struggle, that season could have been, like you said, shorter, it could have been, the burden could have been shared if I had let people in. But at the time, I just didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how to do that yet. But the beautiful thing that came out of that situation was I really, really learned that God is enough. That just me and him, although he wants us to have community, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. I don't want to make this out to seem like, you should just do this alone. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that our dependency on the Lord is enough. The extras are beautiful, make it faster, make it easier, make it better. But God, in and of himself, was enough to get me through that season. And fast forward now, when things are good, my foundation isn't in my circumstances. Like the way that I feel about my life, the security that I feel in who I am and what the future holds does not stand on my circumstances, but it stands on knowing good and well when I was in the thick of it that God was with me, that he was enough to give me that covering of peace, to get me through that turmoil, and I didn't need to numb out, and
And I think that's important to be sharing as well, though. Even though we have these situations where we did it alone, unfortunately, um, it doesn't mean that God didn't come by our side and guide us and
yeah,
strengthen us and deepen our relationships. Because, y'all, that's where I really learned to stop with my perfections and to stop
yeah,
with trying to make everything look perfect and to stop trying to make it look like I had this picture perfect family. And God had a lot to still work on me too. And there was a lot uncovered, right? You still have a lot of like things like come out, and God does come by your side, but geez, how much nicer would it be if we shared that burden,
what's funny though, Taylor, that time frame was where I let go of perfection too. Because with 3 kids, I could keep my house clean. I felt like I had it together. I was working out. I was like hosting. I was doing all the things that I felt like I needed to do, not to be perfect, but
What we
the,
qualify ourselves as like a good
we
wife,
got it.
a good this. Yeah,
Yeah.
like
We got
we're
this.
on point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I felt like, okay, I got it together. Okay. Maybe like emotionally in my heart, things were kind of in a whirl, but on the outside I could keep it together, right? And that season was when I let that go because I just couldn't. I could not keep it together. I could barely stay awake. I was like straight up ugly crying every day. And even when like my few friends would try to like encourage me with God's word, it was like, no, it's not enough. This isn't working. Like this sucks. I could not see the good in it when I was, in it. And
Mhm.
so that broke me down to allow me the space to let go of needing the outside to look good. And fast forward after now I have the 4 kids and the husband's still traveling for work and the house is just like, it's a hot mess over here. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a
4 years
house.
later,
It's a happily lived in home. That is what it
it is. The kids are super happy and have fun and play. But the house is not to my standards of what I would normally like my home to look like. But I'm able to let go of that
But it's
because of that
freeing.
time.
It's
Yeah.
freeing. It's like that whole, letting go of the chains. And sometimes it's things you don't even know that are putting that weight and burden on you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, literally, if you're screaming like a wild banshee about how your house looks because someone's coming over, it might be a sign that that's weighing you down. Like that you hold too much value there, or the way your kid looks when they walk out the door. I mean, y'all, my kids look homeless every day. They are currently outside in like shorts and t-shirt because they refuse jackets and they refuse all these things, and it's like, whatever, they'll learn. If they're cold, they'll come get a jacket. If they're not, they're going to do what they're doing. I don't know. But it's those things we have to slowly let go of. And as women, I think we hold so much. We truly hold everybody's stuff, like
Yeah.
how our child behaved is on us, right? Which to a degree, I mean, your parenting probably reflects a little bit, but at the same time, those children have a mind of their own.
Yes, they
Right?
do.
They are a
They are their own people.
being just like you are a human being, and they make their own choices and their own decisions. Like that's just the truth. Okay, so we can't be carrying those burdens either, or how our husband does something or this, or we take on burdens that aren't ours, and that's the truth. And it's learning how to release ourselves of those things too, right? Because that can make you feel isolating. Like, well, I have to do this, and I'm failing, and I'm the only one that's failing because this person's house looks perfect, and this person's kids, like, they had their Christmas photo up, and their tree looks like this. Whatever, who cares? Like, like, let it
Yeah, I was gonna
go.
say it's like that need for perfection will actually increase your loneliness because it becomes a stumbling block for allowing people in. When you're worried about what your house looks like, what your kids look like, what you look like, all this stuff, oh my gosh, and you feel that weight, it first of all, it hinders you from even inviting people in.
I
And
didn't
then when you
invite
finally do
people
let them in, that's all you're thinking about is what they're thinking about. And
I
it's just
remember,
like
yeah, when we
it's a
lived in
crazy cycle.
yeah, we were in Washington, I would not invite people over because I didn't want to have to scrub my house from like top to bottom. And I would be like, that is so exhausting to me.
Yeah.
Or when I finally did, I'm yelling at everybody like a crazy person. And then our friends come over and you're just like, oh, hello. Like, if that is not hypocritical, like, to show your children this like two-facedness, I don't know
Yeah.
what else is, because I would be like, just don't touch it. You're going crazy, and then your friends come over and you're like, oh, hello, my house is always like
Yeah.
this, come on in, isn't it so beautiful? My children and I are so happy, I never yell at them. And like, they do something naughty in front of your friends and you're like, okay, honey, we're just gonna like do a timeout, where darn well, if your friends weren't there, you would be whopping them on the booty, or like they'd be like in timeout somewhere, like nose in a quarter. I don't know. I don't know how people discipline, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it would not be the response you give when your
Yeah.
friends are there. Let's just be honest. And so it's
But
one of
when
the,
we get to that place of being able to let go, like it opens up the door for being vulnerable with people, for allowing them in, and you can do it in a much more relaxed manner. It's like, yeah, there's still crumbs there from like, last month, but it's all good.
oh yeah, I know my friends would pop in all the time, and they'd come in to have, a cup of tea and stuff. And I would be like, oh yeah, yeah. Oh, don't sit down. Hold on. And I'd like
Hold on.
rerun, getting like milk off the table and cereal bowls and stuff, because I didn't do it right away. And like, let's just be honest, I don't always do it right away. If my kids left it there, I would be like, we're in a rush, just get to school. And it was not a big deal, because when I set the bar of my standards, it allowed them to be comfortable. So when I
Yeah.
was just kind of like, hey, come on in, come as you are, because I'm going to show you
Mhm.
how it is. Okay, this is what my house really looks like with 3 kids, and then 4 kids, and now 5 kids. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to judge you. I don't really care. I'm here to hang out with you. Right. So
Yeah.
to get to that level of peace is important, because like we said, when you are holding all these standards, it definitely isolates you. I know
Mhm.
that I isolated myself because I didn't want to do all the work to the
Yeah.
standards that I put on myself. And that's the truth. Like, I just,
Yeah. And what does that teach the children too? Not only like when we're screaming, yelling at them to clean up, and then we're so nice and sweet with our friends. We're showing our kids, first of all, that they're not as important as our guests, right? And also, I think that makes a home where they don't feel like their friends can come. And I have always dreamed of that, where my home is a space where my kids bring their friends, because this is like their safe space. This is where they feel comfortable. This is where they feel like they can like hang and be themselves. And, I want my children to create their own community as well. And for our home to be a space where they can do that.
I'm the same. I want our house to just be open and welcoming. And it's not going to be able to be that way if we are always trying to make it be a specific way, because then you can't always have it open, right? If you always need to have it at the standard, and like real life
Mm-hmm.
just isn't there, then you're really not going
Yeah.
to have the open home that you are wanting or desiring. And not everybody likes people, so they probably don't want an open house. Like, those introverts out there, they're probably like, no thank you, I'll keep my door shut. But you know what I'm saying, your personal good friends, if you really want them to come over and be with you
Yeah.
and hang out with you, then you have to do that. And I had a couple friends that they would come over, and I'd be like, just come in your pajamas because I'm not doing anything. And they would make me really feel good about myself. But
Yeah, and how much better for them too, right? If you're going into a home where like it's like so, I don't know, like I don't want to say pristine, but where you don't feel like you could be comfortable in yourself, like as a guest also in that space. Doesn't feel very good. It's not to say that you can't have a beautiful, clean home. I still hope and
Right?
aspire to that one day,
Yeah, I do
but
too. And I
the
have friends
overall
that have
feeling
that,
I want
right? Not a
is
big deal.
welcome, right? Be yourself. You're welcome. Get comfortable here.
Mhm.
And I,
And
I want that environment.
yeah, I want to be like to all the friends that really do have those beautiful, really wonderful homes, you all. That's great. That is absolutely
Uh-huh.
amazing. And I
I'm
hope
jealous.
are inviting people in and having a great time. Because I do have girlfriends that have like one kid or two kids, and it is a very different household. But when you're talking to people that have like four kids, five kids, six kids, like we're probably like, oh, that didn't stay where I thought it was going to stay. And that's not, it's a different
Yeah.
situation. So don't compare yourself to your friend that has like one kid who's a teenager. Okay. Because let me tell you, it's going to be different than having four kids under the age of 8.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be different, and that's okay. So that comparison game is also isolating, and it
Hmm.
can be
Oh,
so
big time.
detrimental to us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I know we also wanted to talk about community, right? Like obviously we've talked about it throughout the thing, but you and I both, like, our husbands were active military, and then they were not anymore. I believe your husband's a contractor, is that right? Civilian?
He's an engineer.
Okay.
I Please don't ask me it's something with microchips. But
Yes.
what I did want to talk about is your experience right now, going from home in Arizona to now being on base again.
Yeah. So
What that looked like.
yeah, and so yeah, I think that's like the whole thing is like we transitioned into back into the real world, into civilian life. Okay. And Clarissa's done this already too. So she did this before we did. And what we did, we went from having this amazing community, right? We just had all these friends and everything where we were at. And then my husband made the decision to come out, and he went into as a reservist. But he was out. We were no longer on bases, or we didn't have the same connections and ties. And when we moved to Arizona, oh my dear, was that difficult. And it wasn't just difficult on me, it was difficult on my children, my husband, because we lost our community and we didn't realize what it was going to be like going back into just a normal neighborhood. And
Yeah.
for Arizona, where we were at, there was not a community feeling. Like, we tried to meet our neighbors, and they were pretty closed off with the idea of wanting to know who we were, like very closed off about it. And then they had teenagers on top of it. And so we were like, okay, that's not going to happen. And then to the side of us, they had no kids. They were extremely, like, the neighbors, they pull into their driveway and they close the garage door before they even get out of their vehicle. Like, those were those neighbors. And so I'm like, dang, how are we gonna make any friends here? And my kids are like, where are all the kids? Like, where do we play? Where do we do these things? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to find a friend for myself, because
Yeah.
we got out. You're dealing with friend groups that have been formed since years or ages, or their kids started
Yeah.
kindergarten together or preschool together, and you're coming in with this 9-year-old, like, you don't have that history for the last 5 years, and they're like, we don't need any more friends, like, they're a group, they don't need you, like that. And it's not that they don't need you, but that's how you feel, right? You feel like
Yeah.
they don't need us, and it gets uncomfortable and it gets isolating. And I cannot tell you how many random mom groups I went to and just could not seem to break in. Like, I just could not seem to break in. And it was so uncomfortable because you're going to random people's homes. And I'm like, God, give me friends, My children need friends. I need friends. And it was difficult. It was so difficult. And I really took advantage of military life and what that brought. And so we recently temporarily moved across the country, and my husband went back active just for a short period of 7 months. And literally, you guys, the day we moved in, within 30 minutes, My kids go over to the park and have about 30 friends. They know where everybody's house is. They know where everybody's from. They're having a grand time. They are currently outside in the woods with a bunch of kids right now. Like instant friendship. And they're like, we don't want to go back. We don't want to go back to Arizona. We have friends here. Like people play with us here. We actually can see them physically whenever we want, you know? And that freedom in there has been mind boggling because we've only been in the house since Tuesday, guys. So, I mean, what are we talking about? A few days. And I just took for granted all of those things. And the same way that we moved over here with nothing. So we brought clothes and bedding. And pretty much the outpouring of support we've received is ridiculous. Like our entire house is almost furnished because people gave us things like for free, guys, you know, and we have beds and we have a couch and we have utensils in our kitchen and dishware. And somebody that we never even met before helped us pick up a king mattress that someone was donating to us, you know, like because they had a truck and we had a minivan. You know, like it's been mind boggling. People have brought us food. And our neighbors, the day we were here, they came over and introduced themselves and all their kids. And I'm like, wow, I have missed this. And I didn't realize what we had until we didn't have it. And now kind of thrown back into it, I'm like, oh, I really miss this, you know? And so I think for us, both of us, because I know we're going to come right back out of it in 7 months and I'm going to go back into my regular life in my neighborhood, but to really take advantage of that, you know, to really just relish where you are and like just be in it and enjoy those positive factors because military life, we get it. It has its cons, okay? Like there are those things. Your husband's get deployed and I know that my husband keeps trying to prepare me that he'll be going on one soon. And like, there are negatives and I don't want to, not that they're negative, but you know what I mean? There are hard times.
Well, there are hard parts about it.
Yeah, there are definitely hard situations, but we don't want to not recognize the positives. That community, that sense of like friendship that, you know, they're going to understand. They're going to understand what it's like to have a husband gone or what it's like to try to figure out how to raise these kids and you have no idea and you don't know your husband's schedule and all those uncertainties. Like don't take advantage of those positives that are there. Like right when
sorry. I was going to say when you were telling us about how the neighbors came by and the kids are outside and it just hit me. I was like, man, I miss that because we moved out of military housing 4 years ago. And we had the whole thing where we moved in, we knew our neighbors across the street, our kids were outside all the time. And when we met people who were also, you know, Navy families, or I think it was mostly Navy where we were in our last base, but all those military families, I don't know, there's just this sense of like, not urgency, but I don't know, it's almost like, we don't have time for this. Let's get right to it. Like you're transparent, you're warm, you're welcoming, like you're gonna put yourself out there, you're gonna make friends, you're gonna help each other out. You all know what, you know, what it's like to go through, you know, the moves and, you know, new places, and you all know the whole military life. And so there's a much more openness to meet your neighbors. And when she was saying that, I was like, oh man, I forgot about how good that was. And that aspect of the military community, you don't want to waste it. If you can, if you're still in housing, my kids are like rubbing themselves down the door trying to get in. Sorry if you can hear that. We just got like down the door. Okay. Try not to be distracted by it. But anyway, yeah, I just for those who are still in it, that are still living in military housing, take advantage of it. Put yourself out there, get to know your neighbors if you don't already. And if you do, gosh, enjoy it. It's so, so good. And it's missed because we're now in San Diego. We're in civilian housing, obviously. And it is a lot harder. You have to be a lot more intentional about getting to know people. You really do need to stretch yourself to join those mom groups, to join your church groups, to join those small groups, and knock on neighbors' doors, and um,
Do the
it,
awkward things, like really,
it's very awkward.
you know.
Yeah.
And I
And
did
even though
really
like
awkward things.
we're not necessarily close with our neighbors here, but we still make it a point to knock on their doors. And like, it's the holiday season right now, so we're baking cookies, and with COVID and everything, people aren't getting together, but we can bake cookies and make cards for our neighbors and just let them know that we're here, and maybe we're not close friends, but there's, and our community is a lot more elderly people, but we want them to know that there's a family on your street that is thinking of you. You know what I mean? And it's not the kind of friendship I used to have back in, military housing and in that lifestyle, but we can still do something, to just let people know that they're not alone, especially when, there's older communities, there's widows here who are living alone. You could still do that. But also, like, having my husband's family here, it does tend to kind of make it easier to just rely on that family and not
Mhm.
maybe try as hard like when we were alone and isolated in all these different places. um
It's
so
the
that that's kind of a
the intentional step. So yeah. So I would say if you guys are still in the military and you guys are in base housing, put yourself out there if you have
yeah.
enjoy what is given to you, because it is a different world than when you're back in the the real world.
Hmm.
Honestly, I hate to say it like that, but they are two different environments.
It
And
is.
enjoy the one you're in and really hold on to that and grasp that, because it's different. It's not
Yeah,
isn't bad, it's different. And
but you could also be a blessing to family like you, right, where you step in and you're like, oh man, this is amazing with these people just like
yeah.
coming out of the woodworks to
Mhm.
introduce themselves and to befriend now my kids. Like, you don't realize how much of a blessing you could be to somebody else, just
Exactly.
like.
Like I needed it. I needed people to reach out and I needed support because we literally just did a whirlwind of a move out of nowhere. It really was
Hmm.
out of nowhere. Like we had literally seen you, Clarissa, like days before I told you we were leaving in days. Like there are people out there that just need that. They need that
Hmm.
support. And I've met a couple here that they have helped, but they also are looking for friendships. So they're like, will you hang out with us? I'm like, of course I will. I know nobody. Of course
Yeah.
I will. So, look for them, reach out to them, find them, don't be scared. Um,
Yeah.
because, 9 out of 10 times they also need friendship. So
Hmm.
they want that
And
interaction.
I also want to add too, like, don't forget the friends that you did make on all those bases wherever you've lived. And I still keep in contact with my friends who now live, on the other side of the country, the complete opposite coast, actually. And I hold on to those. I don't want my friends, thinking I forgot about them or thinking I'm just over them. I think about them all the time. And we live in this amazing time of technology where we have Zoom and cell phones and smartphones and FaceTime and all these ways of, staying connected with people who are far away. Just because we switch bases does not mean that we need to let go of those friendships. I mean, you and I met in Washington, became friends when we lived in different states,
Yeah.
right? And made it a point to,
Y'all, it's
like,
okay.
on
Chris
our
doesn't
way.
even remember meeting me in Washington, so don't even worry about it. She doesn't even remember the meeting.
No,
So
no, no. I do remember meeting you. It was in
okay,
passing. I do
it was
remember, but
fantastic. Yeah.
that was it, right? And now we've formed this friendship, with so many miles between us, and even to the point of on a road trip, making it an intentional stop at your house to come visit. You know what I mean? Like, we don't
Yeah.
want to let these things go when we have the blessing of technology to stay, connected.
Exactly. So I guess the point of all of this is if you're struggling with loneliness, honestly, you're not alone. Reach out. Reach out for prayer. Reach
Yes.
out to friendship, trusted friends. Um, and there might be some feelings of rejection, but that doesn't mean to stop, because that could be stopping a massive blessing that God has for you,
Hmm.
or an amazing friendship God has for you, or an amazing prayer that needs to be said over you. So don't stop. And, if you're the one who reaches out, that is amazing. Continue to seek and find those that need that support But if you're the one that needs the support, like do those uncomfortable steps, because I've been
Yeah.
on both sides and I know how uncomfortable it can be. And I still continued to do it until God opened the door to the right one, in that
Yeah.
right friendship. So definitely just, you don't need to be alone. That's like
You're
more
not alone in
story.
feeling
You
alone
are
because we've
not
been there.
alone. Yeah, we've all been there. We've been
Yes.
there. You're not alone. But most importantly, God truly is always with you. And He really is your
Mhm.
protector, your guider, your everything, your peace, all of that. So definitely do not belittle that at all, I would say, because understand the power and strength in that as well. So yeah. Anything else, Clarissa? Yeah.
I think we covered it. I think it was good. Yeah, I definitely like to hone in on your foundation should be with your relationship with the Lord first. Let him be your first and foremost companion. And then from there, reach out to others. Because in like those times of rejection or, things where you're just disappointed in how people react, you're not going to be shaken by that. You can have the strength to keep forward, to keep pushing for those prayer warriors or your next community when you have God as your foundation first and foremost.
Exactly. All right. Well, we would love to also just hear from you, maybe areas you guys struggle, so that we can see it, like, maybe if we can help on the back end or write to you. So just comment if you guys have any similar experiences and maybe how you guys got through that, right? Like we would love to hear that too. Other ways people were able to get through those hard times or that feeling of loneliness. So please share with us, comment, and we will see you guys on the next webinar. All right, bye.